Why can't we just print more acorns? One autumn morning, Squirrel stood on a small hill overlooking Acorn Forest. In his paws was a glass jar. Inside were hundreds of acorns. Years of savings. Every extra acorn he had earned. Every chestnut he had chosen not to eat. Every little sacrifice. All saved for one dream. A house. Not just any house. A beautiful chestnut house beside the river. The kind of house Squirrel had imagined since he was little. And finally, after years of saving, he was getting close. Very close. At least, that was what he thought. As he admired the river below, a special report interrupted Squirrel TV. The news owl looked unusually excited. Breaking news! The Council of Oak Trees has created 1 million new acorns to support the forest economy. Squirrel nearly dropped his jar. 1 million? Created? Just like that? The report continued. The new acorns will help stimulate spending and keep the economy strong. Squirrel stared at the screen. Then he smiled. Actually, that sounded amazing. If the council can create acorns whenever they want, why don't they simply create enough for everyone? Wouldn't every animal become richer? For the first time in years, Squirrel felt hopeful. Maybe his dream house was closer than ever. Maybe life was about to get easier. But a few months later, strange things started happening. At first, nobody noticed. The changes were small, almost invisible. One afternoon, Squirrel stopped by Rabbit's bakery. 1 chestnut pie, please. Rabbit smiled. That'll be 5 acorns. Squirrel blinked. 5? It was 4 last week. Rabbit shrugged. Flour costs more now. Squirrel paid and left. No big deal. A few days later, he bought honey. More expensive. Then carrots. More expensive. Then lumber. More expensive. Then roof tiles. Even more expensive. Everywhere he went, prices seemed to be creeping upward. Slowly. Relentlessly. One evening, Squirrel sat at his kitchen table and counted his savings again. The jar was fuller than ever. Yet somehow, he felt poorer. Something wasn't right. The next morning, he visited Rabbit. Rabbit, why does everything cost more now? Rabbit looked exhausted. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes. Come with me. Rabbit led Squirrel into the bakery. The shelves were nearly empty. Only a few crumbs remained. Look. Squirrel looked around. The bakery was packed. Animals lined up outside the door. Ever since more acorns entered the forest, Rabbit said, everyone is buying more pies. A lot more pies. That's good for business, isn't it? Rabbit laughed. Usually, but I still only have 1 oven. I still only have 2 paws. I can't bake twice as many pies overnight. Squirrel frowned. That made sense. More animals wanted pies. But the number of pies hadn't changed very much. Later that afternoon, Squirrel visited Old Owl beneath the great oak tree. The wise owl listened carefully. Then he placed a basket on the ground. Inside were 100 chestnut pies. Beside it, he placed a pile of 1,000 acorns. Imagine this is the entire forest. Squirrel nodded. Then Owl poured another 1,000 acorns onto the ground. The pile instantly doubled. The basket of pies remained exactly the same. How many pies do we have? Owl asked. 100. And how many acorns? 2,000. Owl smiled. So what changed? Squirrel stared at the baskets. For a moment, he said nothing. Then his eyes widened. There were more acorns chasing the same number of pies. Exactly. The forest had more money. But it did not have more food. More houses. More lumber. More tools. More farms. The amount of stuff animals wanted had barely changed. Only the amount of acorns had. And that pushed prices higher. Squirrel sat quietly. The idea felt uncomfortable. For years he had believed that more money automatically meant more wealth. Now he wasn't so sure. But Owl wasn't finished. There is another part of the story. Squirrel looked up. The first animals who receive new acorns often benefit the most. Owl pointed toward the valley below. Bear had borrowed new acorns and purchased farmland. Beaver had expanded his lumber business. Fox had bought several empty shops near the market. At the time, prices had still been low. Now those same assets were worth much more. Meanwhile, many ordinary animals received extra acorns much later. By then, prices had already increased. The houses cost more. The land cost more. Everything cost more. Squirrel felt a knot form in his stomach. Suddenly, he thought about his dream house. The one beside the river. The one he had spent years saving for. The very next morning, he rushed to the real estate office. A sign hung outside. Chestnut house for sale. Price last year, 10,000 acorns. Current price, 15,000 acorns. Squirrel froze. He checked the numbers again. And again. Surely there had been a mistake. But there wasn't. The house hadn't changed. The river hadn't changed. The trees hadn't changed. Only the price had. Years of careful saving suddenly felt smaller. The finish line had moved farther away. Not because Squirrel had lost acorns, but because the house now required many more. That evening, he sat alone on the hill overlooking the river. The same hill where this story had begun. Below him stood the house he had dreamed about for years. It looked exactly the same as before. Yet somehow it felt farther away. For the first time, Squirrel understood something important. Losing wealth doesn't always mean someone takes your acorns. Sometimes your acorns simply buy less than they used to. The number stays the same. The purchasing power does not. As darkness settled across the forest, Squirrel opened his journal. He thought carefully before writing. Then he wrote, "I used to think wealth meant having more acorns. Today I learned something different. What matters is not how many acorns you have. What matters is how much they can buy." He closed the journal and looked out toward the river one last time. The lights of Acorn Forest glowed softly in the distance. The forest had discovered something surprising. Creating more acorns was easy. Creating more food, more houses, and more useful things was hard. And that raised an even bigger question. If creating too many acorns can make prices rise, then who decides how many acorns should exist in the first place? That is a story for another day.